Good afternoon and welcome to a very special interview show of the Prode. Today, we turn our attention to a significant development in South Asian politics, focusing on the current situation in Bangladesh. Following the recent resignation of Sheikh Hasina and the establishment of an interim government, the region's stability is a key concern. Is this situation rooted in domestic issues or there are broader international dynamics involved? What implications could this have for Bangladesh's relationship with its neighbors, particularly India? In this episode, we will discuss potential geopolitical changes, the role of international organizations in supporting a peaceful transition, and the security challenges that may arise, including concerns about resurgency of militancy. Additionally, we will discuss the steps necessary to navigate Bangladesh towards a stable future. Joining us today to discuss this critical issue is Air Marshal M. Matheswaran. Air Marshal M. Matheswaran, sir, has served as the former Deputy Chief of Integrated Defense Staff. He was responsible for policy, plans, and force development structure of the three services that are Army, Air Force, and the Navy, including budget analysis, acquisition, procurement, and technology management. He was also responsible for formulating the long-term and short-term integrated defense plans. He is a renowned geopolitical analyst and the president of the Peninsula Foundation. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Indeed, an honor having you on the show.
Thank you, Ritvich. Pleasure to be here. Yeah.
So, sir, I would like to start the interview by addressing the elephant in the room. What are your thoughts on the situation in Bangladesh? Is there a Pakistan, China, or another international angle, or a combination of these factors at play? What is your assessment?
Well, first, let me give a little bit of, the background to what's happening in terms of the contest that finally and the protest that broke out. Is that ever since the Bangladesh came into existence in 1971 as a result of India-Pakistan Bangladesh war in 71, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is the founding father of the modern Bangladesh. But you found there were elements that, Pakistan could never live down with the partition of their country, which is in many cases at its birth two completely diametrically opposite cultures and languages. It was inevitable that they broke up finally. So that's what happened in 71. But Pakistani leaders could not digest that, particularly the Islamic radicals. And therefore, I think there was a fair amount of involvement of those forces in the 1975 coup, which was followed up by another military coup. So the military has had some kind of an influence of, or the legacy of Pakistani military in those days. I think they broke out of that after BNP's come into power subsequently, or even when Ershad took control subsequently, they tried to maintain separate identity. But notwithstanding that, ever since Sheikh Hasina came back into power in the early 2000s, particularly in 2009, and since then she's held an iron grip to weed out the fundamentalist forces. And that is what probably has been, something that's worked against the BNP has been held under control. The Jamaat-e-Islami and other radical forces have been virtually, she's dealt with them with an iron fist. But on the other hand, the people have not, had anything against it because the economy has grown and quite progress has been significant. And the per capita GDP of Bangladeshi citizen actually last year went ahead of Indian per capita GDP. So that kind of a significant economic development has taken place. The Chinese have come in a big way in investments, and their Bangladesh is part of the Belt and Road Initiative program, etc. So with all that, if you see the recent, analysis starting from December when Bangladesh went into elections in January, you have a US Secretary of State who actually makes a statement, which is actually a kind of a threat, saying, human rights violations are there, the democracy is under threat, and therefore you need a fair and free elections kind of a statement. And following that, you find the opposition parties boycott the elections. In any case, she's won the election. So I think the start of this entire protest starts from there. Like Thucydides' analysis of Peloponnesian War, everything has a fuse that is required to light up the cracker. So the reservation policy that she announces and that leads to protest is just the matchstick that lights the larger fuse. So the background work has been done by many agencies. And one of the, from a geopolitical angle, if you look at it, uh, as far as India was concerned, Sheikh Hasina was an excellent, probably the best head of Bangladesh political leadership that's worked very well with India. And therefore, I think our relations has been excellent and mutually reinforcing both nations' interests. But from an American point of view, the intrusion of Chinese or the increase of Chinese investments and Chinese role in Bangladesh has not been seen well. And this is therefore looked at as part of a larger agenda of, knocking off this leadership, which is not very well, based with the Western side. And that also bring in a leadership that is more favorable to the West and then deal with China's influence, reduce China's influence. So if you look at Sheikh Hasina's accusation earlier, she had actually accused US of pressurizing her to release the Saint Martin Island, which is for basing the American forces, which means the US wants to get a control of the Bay of Bengal area, and which is fundamentally against the Chinese. But then it doesn't work for India's interests either. It's inimical to India's interests as well. So I think we need to look at all these angles. So there is certainly an involvement of outside forces. The rumors say that CIA has been fully involved, but the US has, declined, has refused that, saying that there's been no involvement. But the person who's now chosen by the student leaders and who heads the interim government is pretty much a Western sympathizer. I mean, he may be a Nobel laureate, but he's very clearly known to be a Western sympathizer, and therefore you can see what is unfolding. So it's a little difficult for India's interest. We'll have to wait and see how things unfold as it moves along.
Yeah, so sir, you talked about the interim government. So what impact could Sheikh Hasina's sudden resignation and the formation of an interim government have on the stability of entire South Asia?
Well, the interim government will bring more of intellectual. As long as the radicals don't take control, Mohammed Yunus, I mean, having been brought up in the West and educated there, so in terms of democratic values and other areas, he will probably be aligned towards a secular nature of looking at things. And therefore, if he's able, with the support of the military and the student leadership, if he's able to keep the Jamaat-e-Islami and the radical elements of BNP under check, and then be able to provide a movement towards free and fair elections for a elected government to come in place, then I think probably the stability will be under control. The internal stability I'm talking about. In terms of whole of South Asia is concerned, I think India can handle that quite well. So I think we follow a wait and watch policy and deal with it as it moves along further. But with they also have the Rohingyas who moved in from Myanmar into Bangladesh, and there are other elements in Bangladesh, minorities who get threatened. These are all factors that we'll have to wait and see. Because if the radicals take full control, then it will be Bangladesh will slide into an anarchy and a complete mess. But I think that may not happen because the military is fully involved, and they're not like a earlier coups that they've taken over power, but I think they're probably playing their role in the background, but in control of the situation, as I see.
Yeah, so sir, how might Sheikh Hasina's departure and the ensuing violence influence Bangladesh's international relations, particularly with countries like India? Because we are considering the fact that we have seen what happened with the Hindu community and other minority communities in Bangladesh, and even Prime Minister Modi yesterday has raised this issue from the Red Fort.
Well, anti-Hindus, sentiments in Bangladesh ever since 71, as the radical elements started rising post 75, let me put it that way, has been well known. The population strength of Hindus have reduced considerably, over the last 30 years, right? So in a situation like this, that's bound to come up. But I think we've handled it a little better instead of allowing people to flee, and we've encouraged them to, it is their country and they need to stay there and enforce their freedom and liberty and demand and get that enforced well is a correct strategy that I think the countries follow, India has followed there. And therefore, I think it reflects in Muhammad Yunus's statement as well that minorities have to be protected. And I think that message has gone down well to Bangladesh. So internationally, I'm sure even the US would have sent across that message. Because if they don't, adhere to that kind of settle down and stop targeting the minorities, then, like I said, Bangladesh will slide into an anarchy. It will be bad for their own welfare. And as a country that was growing economically quite well, I think more than 50% of the population is not supporting these kind of radical elements. I think they'll come under control.
Yeah. So now talking about Bangladesh's relationship with China and the United States. So how do you think that the new leadership will deal with these two nations?
Well, this is going to be interesting because China has made significant investments. And I remember we had a conference with South Asian nations on the blue economy last year. And we had a scholar from Bangladesh, and even the former ambassador from Bangladesh had come and participated. So uh, they were quite clear about what is good in their national interest. When we spoke about China's entry and Bangladesh's orientation towards Belt and Road Initiative, well knowing that its larger neighbor India is not for the BRI, they explained it quite well. While we understand India's sensitivities, I think Bangladesh national interest dictate that we go in for, inviting Chinese investments into the country. So I think depends on the leadership. Although Mohammed Yunus will certainly probably control and downsize the Chinese role or Chinese investments at the behest of the West. But it may not be easy for them because a lot of investments have already taken place. And the BRI, it's not easy for Bangladesh to get out of BRI at this moment, in my opinion. Nor will it be sensible for them either. So I believe there's going to be a tussle between the West wanting to get into a bigger role in Bangladesh and China wanting to retain its current role in Bangladesh. And then India balances the whole issue because I think we are still the largest trading partner for Bangladesh. Much of the trade is in our favor. And I think Bangladesh cannot, live without India as far as these roles of trade and economic cooperation is concerned. So I think they will have to understand these nuances and play their role extremely well. It's going to be a tussle between the West and the China for a bigger role in Bangladesh over the next, let's say, a decade, when Awami League is not allowed to come into power and other forces come into power, post the interim government.
Yeah. So now coming to international organizations. So what, according to you, does the international organizations such as United Nations or SARC play in what role they can play in ensuring a peaceful and democratic transition of power? And why is it that even after having so many multilateral organizations, the wars and conflicts in general in the world is spreading on a rapid scale, be it Israel and Iran, be it Russia, Ukraine, or even in Bangladesh? So how does international organizations are affecting the geopolitical dynamics and why they are failing in maintaining the stability across?
Well, I mean, if you look at the world as a whole, the international organizations have actually, I would say, they've virtually failed in terms of playing an effective role. Who listens to UN? I mean, despite their very valid observations on Gaza, the US doesn't listen to it. The US calls the shots, correct? And so also in Ukraine, the UN is actually forced to actually play a certain role by the domination of the European Union and the US in that entire process. So I think in terms of international organizations' role in Bangladesh, they could provide very rational advice. They could provide other assistance in terms of if there is an election of held, they could send the observers and play that kind of a role. But with India, the biggest democratic country right next to Bangladesh as its major neighbor, surrounded on all sides by India, I don't think any international organization or multilateral organization would want to get very actively involved in Bangladesh without actually taking India's sensitivities into it. Nor, I think, will India even allow that, because India is there to actually help out Bangladesh when they need something. So even if the Americans want to push in, let's say, the multilateral organizations uh, to address, should a situation arise like that, I don't think it will arise. That need may not be there. But should it arise, I think they will take India's sensitivities into account, considering the kind of strategic partnership that we keep vociferously voicing about India-US strategic partnership that's growing. I think it will only be sensible for them to take India's sensitivities into account before intervening or intersecting into Bangladesh, should the situation get more complicated.
Yeah, so you talked about India. So how can Indian government come into picture, and how can Indian government make sure that the security as well as political situation in Bangladesh is in balance?
So if we analyze what has happened over the last, let's say, 20 years, I think our relations have stabilized very well. There's a lot of give and take that's happened between the two countries. And with Sheikh Hasina's government, I think a lot of openness has come in, and better, interaction people to people as well as government to government, and the trade relations have actually stabilized quite well. So the interest, at least on India's part, is to have a continuity in the process that we've established with Hasina's government, with the new government that may come up, both with the interim and any future government that may come up after the elections. That would be India's objective. But we'll have to wait and watch what would be the orientation. The BNP has traditionally had a kind of a, most likely the BNP may come back to power, may come to power. They may marginalize the Awami League by various mechanisms that may happen. Although Awami League, I still believe, has the maximum support in the population. But if BNP comes back to power, then they are known to have an anti-India stance as a policy to drive nationalism in their country for political purposes. But then, given various economic considerations, both India has had a bigger role in economic assistance and economic partnership with Bangladesh, and China is a big player in terms of those economic issues. I think any party that comes to power, any political leadership that takes over, will have to give a more rational thought to the processes. So the continuity part may take some time to get established from what we've had so far and what might happen. So you will have to look at what may happen in the short term and what may happen in the long term. So in the short term, it may be a little slow. India and Bangladesh relations may cool down a little bit, but it may not be inimical to each other. They may factor all that has happened in the last 15, 20 years. And I think there may be a rational choices that may be taken, taking into account what kind of political sensitivities that the new government may want to play around with within the country. So India may understand that and then give them adequate time. So in the medium term and long term, I think we may get back to how strong we are right now. That is what, in my analysis, would happen. With respect to China, I suppose there will be a downsizing of China now that Western orientation has come in to some extent. And with India is also coming in, possibly there could be some downsizing of China's influence in the Bangladesh politics. That's what might happen.
Yeah, so you talked about the interim government and maybe a new government if the election happens on a timely basis. So, now coming to another angle of it, that is military intervention. So, what are the potential risks of military intervention in Bangladesh, and how it might affect the balance of power within the country as well as the geopolitical equations?
The military intervention is already there in the sense, I mean, it would have been total chaos. The military has taken control. Unlike in the past where the military has violently taken control and then exercised complete control and allowed political parties to do what it says, this time I think it's been done in a nuanced way. So the chief of staff, the chief of army staff, General Zaman, if I'm right, has played his role, I think, more, you know, mm, in a sophisticated way, which indicates that they are not capturing power, but they are facilitating a transition. So he's the one who advised reportedly Hasina to resign and then move off, and they facilitated her safe exit. It could have been violent otherwise. And then he's also facilitated the Mohammed Yunus to come in, and then the interim government to be formed. So the military is in full control. So I think we should understand quite well. And it is important at this stage that the military is in control, because otherwise it could be chaotic and the radical elements may take control. And that would be a disaster for Bangladesh and for the regional environment as well. So in a way, I think that's somewhat better at this stage, as long as military doesn't take full control for running the country over the next, as it happened in the coups in the past. So if the interim government now starts exercising full governance and administration and starts moving towards a fully elected government, let's say in the next 6 months to 1 year, then I think, and when the military facilitates that entire process, then I think it would be a good stabilized process that will be in play.
Yeah.
And I think that's what will happen.
Yeah, so I would like to conclude the discussion by asking that what is your assessment of Sheikh Hasina's, status vis-a-vis her stay in India, as well as there have been several reports where Western nations have denied access to entry to Sheikh Hasina in their nation. So, what according to you might be the reason, and what according to you is this assessment of her, stay in India as well as any other nation if she wants to go in?
Well, the reaction of the West, particularly UK, in reportedly denying her, an asylum, etc., is obviously at the behest of the US. She has been quite, let me put it this way, she's actually exhibited a very strong strategic autonomy during her tenure, correct? And withstood the pressures of the West. And therefore, I think this kind of reaction from the West as far as her issue is concerned. But she's quite safe. I mean, in the sense, there are many other countries which will allow things to cool off. The Scandinavian country, I think her son is in one of the Scandinavian countries, if I'm right. May cool off, things may cool off, and then she may, find, space in any of those countries, even including UK, etc. That is one part. As far as being in India, I think that's the safest and quite a logical thing that she did, because given the relation that existed with her government and India, I think the Indian government has done well to actually accommodate her at this time of crisis. We could encourage her to move in whichever way she wants to move in, but that ultimately that's her decision. She will have to take the decision. But till such time she has the environment works in her favor, whether she wants to now, if things cool down in a year's time and the politics comes back and she wants to now get back into Bangladeshi politics, as her son in an interview actually indicated, all that possibilities will have to be considered, I suppose, only much later, after about 6 months to 1 year. I think, and she's in mid-70s. I would say she probably would work to establish Bangladesh, alternate the next generation of leadership, take over Awami League, and ensure Awami League functions as a very robust and full-fledged party, hand over the reins, and then she probably will moves away into gradual oblivion, is the right strategy to follow in the longer term. But in the meantime, I think giving her the safety and freedom to live in India till such time she finds any other place she wants to go to, I think it's a logical thing to do. It's a good thing to do.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. Indeed, a pleasure hosting you on the Prode, and really hope the situation in Bangladesh gets well as soon as possible. On this note, would like to conclude the interview. Thank you once again for your time.
Thank you very much, Ritwich. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thank you.